Fala galera, beleza? Voltei em mais um vídeo, trazendo aí a segunda novidade mais notória do Remastered de The Last of Us Parte 2. Qual que é, Ed? São as fases perdidas, que tem os comentários desenvolvedor. São fases que estão em estado pré-alpha, inacabadas, que faziam parte do desenvolvimento original do jogo. Vamos lá então, se você quiser, pode apenas aí assistir, deixa o like, compartilha, comenta e vamos nessa. Ah, se você não jogou o jogo, recomendo que você não assista, beleza? Vamos começar pela festa em Jackson, depois o esgoto e depois a caçada. A festa em Jackson é quando eles dão aquele beijo lá, que foi bastante polêmico no jogo e tudo mais lá, né? Estado pré-alpha, o nível não contém diálogo, apenas falas temporárias mostradas como legendas. Eu tirei os comentários do desenvolvedor porque é chato ficar vendo videozinho, filminho e tudo mais, né? Isso aí, Ellie, enche a cara aí. Isso aí.
Originally, this level was going to transition us to farm. We would go all the way through to the dance, where Ellie and Dina share their first kiss. Then we would play through farm, and when Ellie plays the guitar.
Lembrando que essa fase ela não tá, né, no jogo, ela é uma fase perdida.
We had this idea of recontextualizing all of our usual gameplay mechanics that were designed for really violent ends. The workbench, door bashes, throwable weapons, and even the infected, which is my personal favorite. Peppered throughout the level are moments of levity or shared history, all the while seeing how happy and mundane they all were before her huge revenge odyssey.
Olha que legal, ela enche a cara, ó. Pô, deviam ter deixado isso aí, hein, velho. Ô, o bagulho é da hora, ó. Oh, ela enche a cara, legal, velho. Nossa, ela tá com uma cara de abobada, né, nessa pré-alpha. Olha, teus... Vai, adulta. A criança pequena aí. Sentou. Olhou pra cima. Tá no luau. Puxa um back. Tá em casa. Tá em casa, né, Ellie? Tá em casa. Vamos lá, isso aí. Aí, pá, e vem pra cá,
There's
pá.
a spot at the back that was just a bit of fun. It was highlighting Jackson's normalcy with something we would find in a real world. In the back, you would find teenagers finding some alone time with each other in a dark corner of a party. Player for peeking into a hidden corner, but ultimately redirecting them back to the festival. We also had versions of them smoking weed here, despite Maria's consternation.
Ah! Tinha versões dos caras fumando maconha aí. Pô, cara, isso devia ter ido pro jogo original, velho. Ah.
This is one of my favorite sections because I think that it achieves both the slice of life aspect of Jackson while also being a stark reminder of how dark the world that they live in really is. To attract attention and curiosity, one of the kids was supposed to make this adorable, messed up little clicker impression, and the others would giggle. We tried a version where if you got close enough, the kid might try and follow you a little before turning back. Since clickers are blind and move by echolocation, for this game of messed up tag, Ellie must close her eyes and listen for when the children give themselves away. The thought was that these kids are in relative safety. They still grow up with the dangers of clickers and runners, and all those lessons would embed themselves in the games that they play.
Legal,
When the festival
legal.
got cut, they tried to preserve this moment and move it to the front of the game where the snowball fight is, as a tutorial. However, being in the headspace of a clicker doesn't really teach you how to deal with them. Eventually, it evolved, and they instead made the snowball fight, which was, I think, way more effective. The makeup artist is pretty simple. It's one of those little in-game scenes we peppered in to make it feel like Ellie had roots in the town. Hallie, our writer, mentioned that in her
Ah, sim. Ah, sim. Até porque maquiadora...
to cover up her skull.
Tudo a ver, né?
So we figured this might be the only time you get to see that. We wanted to hint at it and allude to it and make it feel like there had been so much more that had been happening and so much more that Ellie threw away.
Interessante. Interessante. Ela tem um braço que tem a folha da maconha inteira ali, ela vai colocar no rosto. É interessante, cara. Eu acho que é melhor do que você ver um DVD do, sei lá, dos Vingadores Ultimato e só ter os comentários, né? Pelo menos aqui você participa.
It is not a festival without one of these throwing games. This one, of course, uses our throwable system where you're often chucking explosive things or stunning things, but for a more wholesome purpose, although some people take this game really seriously. A fun aspect of this is if you did well, you could win a toy here. Ellie would place it in her pocket. If you had done this, you'd find the toy with JJ, the baby, later back at the farm. When we cut this, the toy made it through anyway because it was so cute. It is the same one you see on the tractor at the farm. Ollie the elephant.
Pô, tem umas partes que eles não deveriam ter cortado não, cara. Achei que, né, traria bem mais... O jogo ia ficar bem mais de boaça. Ai, o Tommy. Grande Tommy. Acho que aqui é a do cavalo, não é? Não me lembro.
So the boar hunt was
A caça ao javali.
levels for me to work on.
É
It was a
verdade.
huge challenge with the systems that we had, and we kept trying, but it never felt quite right. Originally, the level happened after the Jackson Festival, which also got cut, but before Farm. Once the festival got cut, it became the prologue to Farm. The intended experience is that we jump forward in time after the fight with Abby in the theater. We don't know where Dina is. We likely assume she's dead because she was just bleeding out. Ellie is alone. Her hair is short. So maybe this is the future or the present. In early iterations of the fight, it was more arena-like. The player slowly whittles down the boar's health. Ellie gets more visceral and more vicious. We get a little worried about her. As the boar gets weaker, more panicked, more feral, and we start feeling sympathetic to the boar was the hope. In all of these iterations, especially of these wider areas, it required custom AI and scripting to make sure it continued to feel organic as an animal. We must have gone through 5 or 6 iterations of the boar fight and all, and every single time it changed pretty drastically. We split it into clear phases, where one was like all long range.
Cara, mesmo estágio pré-alpha, o cenário é legal.
And you get to jump on it quite literally, you're jumping off of a rock.
É isso aqui que eu acho,
And then
entendeu?
finally we try to
Eles deviam ter
sort of,
terminado essas
go on a
partes
bunch of
e ter
trailers
colocado
and
como
try
DLC.
and wrestle it.
Pô, ia ficar maneiro, entendeu? Ó, jogue fases que não tem no jogo comum. Experimente pedaços da história que tem uma outra visão. Pô, isso que ia ser legal. Não, só tem os comentários, você não faz nada, você só anda.
For a cold open after the boar had already been hurt off screen. So that allowed us to focus on feeling like we're closing in on.
É isso aqui que eles poderiam ter feito.
When it was at its most dangerous.
Fases novas, entendeu? A adição ali, não só o tapa gráfico, não só o modo de jogo.
Bring us more into Ellie's mindset. Is this really hunting for food, or is she hunting for some other reason? The gas station was built to highlight the boar's destructiveness. Since it's cramped, the boar feels larger. We also feel trapped with it, though perhaps it's trapped with us. When it charges, it gets to us quickly, so we must be on our toes. This made it more aligned with Ellie's sort of hunting for trouble mindset. Listening became more important, as well as moving around slowly so it didn't hear you. Could you spot it before it saw or heard you? And could you get a shot off quickly enough so you could dodge out of the way?
Javali.
Is the shot worth the cost?
Cara, essa parte do javali foi...
By the end of the fight, everything would likely be in shambles. The boar would burst through the back, and Ellie would follow it and finally enact revenge.
É, ele vai tocando aqui os audiologs,
We
né?
must have gone through 5 or 6 iterations of the boar fight and all, and every single time it changed pretty drastically. We split it into clear phases, where one was like all long range. We tried another where you're getting close and you get to jump on it quite literally. You're jumping off of a rock to attack it. And then finally, we tried a bunch where you almost sort of go around a bunch of trailers and try and wrestle it. We uncovered after some time that taking down a boar over several phases felt very laborious and a little dramatic. It was comically long, it felt too boss-like, a little too gamey. We decided to cut the first few phases, and we opted for a cold open after the boar had already been hurt off screen. So that allowed us to focus on feeling like we're closing in on prey and to introduce the boar when it was at its most dangerous. Already hurt, already feral, much too close for comfort. And so the thinking was it would bring us more into Ellie's mindset. Is this really hunting for food, or is she hunting for some other reason?
Interessante, né? Interessante. Eles com certeza eles devem ter terminado alguma coisa. Eles não vão jogar um pré-alpha assim. Isso aqui tá muito bom pra ser um pré-alpha, entendeu? Às vezes poderiam ter terminado a fase por completo, mesmo que, olha, a gente terminou aí pra vocês terem uma ideia do jogo, mesmo assim.
Peguei. Acabou.
Um rastro, né? O javali até desapareceu, né? Ah, tem mais uma parte aqui.
The boar kill was supposed to be anything but glorious. With the boar whimpering at the back of the gas station after Ellie's relentless hunt. After this, hearing the drone that we kind of come to...
Fase a última, né? O esgoto de Seattle. Eu nem lembro como é que era essa daqui. Ah, lembrei.
Sai de cima de mim!
Não sei se... Ah, é verdade. É o negócio do barco. Elas passam 8 horas no barco. Vamos lá, vamos ver quais comentários tem aqui.
Odeio Seattle.
Vamos aqui já.
Onde que eu tô?
The ladder acts as an immediate goal for the player, but being able to climb out is not going to be so easy. To keep levels interesting and engaging, we alternate between positive and negative values the player experiences. Here, it's a positive to have found a ladder, but then a negative to discover it's not the solution. But then another positive to identify the next short-term goal of the doorway. By alternating between these opposing values, we give players what they expect, but not how they expect it. This level, internally known as
essa apelação de sentimento que é complicado.
Far distance to the opposite side of downtown Seattle. The sewer section was originally longer than what we released the game with, approximately 10 minutes more.
Nossa, 10 minutos era o original.
Game that used water flow as part of a traversal puzzle. The player has to go upstream to use the current to get to the platform to reach the other side. We mostly cut this mechanic game wide, however, it remained in essence in the section swimming to the aquarium as Ellie.
Ah, é verdade, ele ficou um pouquinho.
When players reach the doorway and enter into the room, they're faced with a dead end. The real reason for this dead-end room is that on the reversal, when exiting back out of the doorway, players are faced with the route onwards. A pipe that they'd not been able to see when they were swept past it on the way in, and something that was hidden from view when on the side platforms. The intention here being that the only option is to go off the standard path in order to search for a way out.
É verdade, ó. É um beco bem sem saída mesmo. Ela veio daqui, né? Coisa doida, né, cara? O jogo ia ter mais quebra-cabeças do que ele realmente teve.
When players reach the doorway and enter into the room, they're faced with a dead end. The real reason for this dead-end room is that on the reversal, when exiting back out of the doorway, players are faced with the route onwards. A pipe that they'd not been able to see when they were swept past it on the way in, and something that was hidden from view when on the side platforms.
Me tira desse lugar,
The intention here being that the only option is to go off the standard path. Throughout the rest of the level, we also use light to indicate to the player that they were heading in the right direction. At each turn, however, we block the direct route forward. Players know that we slowly introduce the player to consider climbing into smaller pipes and crouching in these tight spaces. This is to slowly we added a tiny space just to reward the player's exploration with a pickup item. And we made sure it was something that made sense. We love the idea of making Ellie prone through a tiny dirty
Isso aqui é até interessante.
Great opportunity to use our prone mechanic. The unique camera setup was created.
Mas eles não podem ficar só nessas mecânicas, né? Quebra-cabeça, 10 minutos.
We also created custom collision in order for Ellie to maneuver in these tight spaces.
É muita coisa, cara.
Initially, the oblong collision capsule around the character caused issues crawling around corners. We put extra effort into the in order for the player to feel cramped, claustrophobic and desperate. We'd been enforcing the traversal mechanics that allow for a tight environment which promote these feelings. We introduced the use of the squeeze through so that we can keep the player feeling enclosed and tight, but without repeating the same geometry. Here we change from low ceilings with wider walls to high ceilings and tight walls to change up the spatial pacing and keep the level from repeating itself. Originally, we had the waterline much higher here, so players had to swim through. As we surface from the water and over the crest of the slope, we reveal what is further in this tunnel. A clicker that has sprouted and the fungus has grown on the sides of the pipe. It was great to see people who user-tested this area becoming increasingly worried as we forced the player to squeeze past the fungus and inches away from the clicker's face, all the time not being sure whether the clicker might be alive or attack them. Although we aren't as cruel as to force a clicker attack in such close proximity, we do have a payoff for this moment. This clicker momentarily turned into Joel to show Ellie's PTSD from what happened to Joel at the start of the game. Ultimately, we decided to save this moment for the farm level, as it was more impactful there because it could become the centrepiece of that experience. Whereas in the sewers, we weren't able to make it as much of a narrative point and give it the breathing room and reaction time that it deserves, given the tight space.
É da hora que ela vem da água, cai da água, volta pra água. Muito bom. Né? Realmente, como eles falaram, né? É uma parte que leva muito mais tempo pra ficar no jogo mesmo.
We eventually opened you out into a wider area as you traverse through such tight spaces leading up to this. So changing the environmental pacing makes it begin to feel like we're coming to the end of Ellie's ordeal. An earlier iteration used the current that we'd shown at the start for a slightly tougher traversal puzzle to conclude the sewers. The ladder was clearly visible from most of the area, but the player was faced with a fast-flowing torrent of water they couldn't cross. If the player attempted to jump into the water, they were not able to swim across the ladder due to the water's speed. But instead, they had to traverse the pipe running along the top of the space in order to get across the water. This is the first time we get to see stalkers that are embedded into the walls. So this optional room is a nice little early extra that the player gets if they explore. We also use the pickups to lure players over to be close enough to trigger the stalker's attack. And this caused quite a few jump scares with user testers who played our game before its release.
Beleza.
This is the first time we get to see stalkers that are embedded into the walls. So this optional room is a nice little early extra that the player gets if they explore. We also use the pickups to lure players over to be close enough to trigger the Stalker's attack. This caused quite a few jump scares with user testers who played our game before its release. Using this pipe was retained in the iteration we shipped with, as it's the last of the extreme methods Ellie has to undergo in order to escape the sewers, and what she will go through in her pursuit of revenge. The last ladder climb is quite lengthy, and although we could have trimmed it down to a shorter climb, we liked how this last segment of the journey built anticipation for whether there was success at the top or not after all you've been through. Ultimately, the ladder exits out into the subway station, which is how it connects in the final game. Ellie then has to find her way to the hospital from here, crossing paths with the scars for the first time.
Aí, galera, então as fases perdidas, né, são 3, poderiam ter colocado mais, poderiam ter colocado uma gameplay mais da hora, mas é isso aí, então. As duas novidades de The Last of Us 2 Remastered. Forte abraço, fiquem com Deus, valeu, falou, fui!